Hi, welcome to season 2 of Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. I'm Dean Way. This season, we're going to talk through some scenarios that companies and these CMOs experienced to share lessons learned and tips on how to get the most out of a fractional CMO that you hired. So, hi, Alan.
Hey, Dean, how you doing?
Good,
Glad to
thank
be
you.
here.
Alan, so you just started a hypothetical. We always do the same thing in the podcast. You just started a hypothetical one-year engagement. Like, what's the first problem most of your clients need to start fixing? And also, please, tell the audience a little bit about you.
Okay, so starting about me, I'm a fractional interim CMO and also a CMO executive advisor, primarily for SaaS software and health IT companies. I've been a CMO 10 times, 7 full-time and 3 since I started my company 3 years ago. I've mentored and advised over 110 CMOs when I was at Serious Decisions and Forrester. And I work primarily with private equity portfolio companies. I've worked with 4 and 7 portcos. So, when I start an engagement, to your question, the first thing I look at is what's their value proposition? Is
Right.
it clear? When you go to their website, do you know what they do? And I'll give you one example. I started with one private equity portfolio company, and they were in the health IT space, and they made a revenue cycle management product. But when you looked at their website, you saw happy people on a beach. And I said, what do we sell? Drugs? I mean, what
Travel.
kind of business are we in? So I think the value proposition, how they articulate it, and the creative on the website needs to match what business they're in, what domain and industry they're in. And then the other thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, is I start to look at what is their infrastructure.
Right.
So when I look at infrastructure, I look at 5 things. I look at people, process, technology, data, and analytics. And that's kind of where I start doing an assessment.
And hey, Baron, how about you? What's the sort of first problem that you find that your clients need to start fixing, or you need to start fixing for them? And go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about you as well.
Thank you, Dean. Excited to be on here, and great answer, Alan. My name is Baron. I've been in marketing for almost a decade as a fractional CMO and an agency owner. I've worked with over 100 clients to date, a lot in tech as well, some in healthcare, e-commerce, real estate. And we actually just calculated with my team that we've generated over $65 million in new revenues that we can track for
Nice.
businesses. Yeah, most of that was generated in real estate, finance, and healthcare as well. And I'm the biggest fan of electronic music you'll ever likely see in a marketing
Same here,
podcast.
EDM.
Yes, amazing. Some techno house, So that's awesome. In terms of a hypothetical one-year engagement, so the first thing that I need to do, and this is typical, I say this to a lot of people, you wouldn't go to a doctor and trust what they tell you, if it's buying a drug or without them asking the right questions and having a conversation, listening to what you have to say, and asking the right questions, not just asking questions, but asking the right questions. So typically what I like to do, and over the last few years, I've developed a questionnaire that gives me a very holistic understanding about a business. So not just things relating to marketing, some high-level questions about KPIs and goals, but also asking questions about sales, like how long is the sales cycle? Asking questions about team resources, capacity. Do you have people who can do these things in your company? Who are the vendors that you've been working with? Stuff like that. Because when it comes to a fractional CMO engagement, we're either working with marketing teams in-house, we're working with vendors, we're working with a hybrid of in-house marketing teams and vendors. So it's important for us to know the broader, get a 10,000-foot view understanding of what's going on. And asking the right questions holistically helps me understand, okay, if marketing is going well, maybe the problem's not there. Maybe the revenue issue is coming from a marketing and sales alignment. Maybe the tech stack isn't what it should be. Maybe they're not communicating properly. So how can we, through marketing support sales or vice versa? And the same goes with operations. So the first thing that I do always when starting a one-year engagement is I go through the motions of a very holistic questionnaire, and I ask them, all the questions that I can to get to know as much about their business insofar as marketing is of concern, but also anything around marketing too, so that I can identify other areas of opportunity to make marketing more impactful.
So that's good. Let's stick with that for a second then. I have another question that came off of that. So besides that sort of information gathering and information sharing, right? For the CEOs in this audience, like, what would you advise a CEO to do to get sort of like maximum value out of you or out of a fractional CMO? Squeeze every last penny of value out of that 1-year engagement.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I'll tell you the biggest mistake I actually see CEOs make.
Yeah.
And I'm also in a mastermind with a lot of other fractional CMOs, and I hear this a lot. This isn't just from my experience. Actually, in my experience, this doesn't happen too much, not to me at least. But I hear a lot of fractional CMOs talking about this. The biggest mistake I see CEOs make is that they actually don't give the fractional CMO enough autonomy,
Right.
or they don't trust them enough with some of their methodology or input. Which is funny because you're paying someone a lot of money, and then you're telling them what to do or what you think that they should be doing, instead of trusting their expertise and giving them that autonomy, which I think is extremely important. So that's probably the biggest mistake that I see. And to get the maximum value, I would say, first of all, to give the fractional CMO, that autonomy, but also to equip them with all of the context. So, for example, when I ask in my questionnaire, what does your sales cycle look like? The reason I'm asking is not just to understand from a paid media standpoint, so that I know, how long it'll take to start generating some revenue from our efforts today. I'm also asking because from an SEO standpoint, there's also a ramping up period. So, if it takes 3 to 6 months to start ramping up, and ranking for certain keywords with the SEO vendor or the team, and the sales cycle is about another 2 months, then I'm setting realistic expectations by saying it's going to take 5 to 8 months before we start seeing some really good revenue generation here. So it's the context is really important, but it's not just, hey, what's the sales cycle for your company or whatever you're selling, but break it down. Tell me the sales cycle for certain products. Tell me why you think it's been taking so long. By giving all of that context, it really equips us fractional CMOs with the information that we need to make well-informed decisions, and to be able to steer the ship in the right direction.
And Alan, how about you? What do you think? You've worked with a lot of CEOs, right? How do they either not waste the money that they spent on their fractional CMO, or how do they get the most value from what they're spending for a fractional CMO?
I haven't seen a lot of CEOs that haven't taken my advice or, have tried to tell me what to do. But that may be the size of companies I deal with, since I deal primarily with private equity. The companies I deal with are generally over 100 million. They're getting to the next level, into the billions. So maybe that's, when I join the ELT, I become them. I act just like I'm a full-time CMO, even though I may be fractional or interim. The biggest issue I see is where a CEO may not have a clear understanding of what marketing is and what marketing can do and what marketing should be doing. And also, I haven't seen this, but I've heard a lot of fractional CMOs complain about this, and that is, wanting fractional CMOs to do a lot of tactical stuff. Right. When I haven't experienced it, but I'm dealing with larger companies. But I look at this as I offer 3 things. I offer leadership, strategy, and my network, and I get involved working on the ELT. Not just in marketing, but cross-functionally. I've been in different functions as well. In addition to marketing, I've been a P&L general manager. I've been in sales. I started in finance, but I work very well across the C-suite. And so I, at the very beginning, usually bond with the CFO and the CEO to get a clear understanding of what marketing is today. And people can be prejudiced based on their experience. So I think it's important, in order to set the right expectations, to start with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So then let's branch out a little from that, because we talked about like other CMOs. You both talked about groups you're in and stuff. So you get to pass along one lesson to like another fractional CMO, right? Who's going to be walking in to a new engagement, walking into a company where there are already people working in marketing. Like, Alan, sort of, what's your one lesson to the fractional CMO that's going to be walking into that environment?
Don't come in as an implementer. Come in as a strategic partner on the C-suite,
Right.
and take your time to get to know the folks. Don't try to make too many changes too quickly. Similar to what Baron was talking about, ask questions, get to know the people, get to know the environment, not just marketing, but, sales. Yeah. Yes. The ASP and the sales process, get to understand what they think they've been successful with and where you think the gaps are in the infrastructure, and think long term. The engagements I've loved the best are when I've been a fractional or interim CMO, say 6 to 9 months, and they hire a full-time CMO, and then I stay on for another year and a half and help that CMO be successful. So you're planting seeds and you're putting together programs and infrastructure in it, to cover the gaps that will take them into the future. And change management takes a while. Right. So I like to think of it that way. If that makes sense.
By the way, you mentioned a term, and this is a like jargon. We have a lot of non-marketing people who watch. So ASP is
average selling price, selling cycle. I was kind of building on what Baron was saying about the selling cycle.
And how about you, Baron? You're going to advise like your friend, another fractional CMO. They're walking into a new engagement. That company already has like some junior or even some mid-level marketing folks on a team. Like, what's the one lesson? What should they look out for? Or what should they try to like establish or get done first?
So, by the way, really good answer, Alan. I really value that. You're very experienced, and that's a really, really good piece of advice there for all the people listening. Another piece of advice for a fractional CMO walking into a company where there are people in marketing is to think of how you can be resourceful with the team. So oftentimes, I actually get asked this question sometimes. You're coming into a new company and there's a marketing team that already exists there. Do you ever get like pushback? Do people ever, and sometimes, people will push back a little bit in the beginning, but it really depends on how you're facilitating the conversation. And at the end of the day, I don't really impose any thoughts or ideas. What I really like to do towards the beginning is look at the marketing team, get an Excel spreadsheet, write everyone's names down, their roles, and try to identify their strengths and their weaknesses. First of all, are they doing what they want to be doing? Are they doing what energizes them? Maybe they are a paid media specialist, but they really like doing design. Maybe they are a marketing manager, but they really want to do like a lot of like direct response copywriting. Like, these are their strengths. How can we be resourceful and leverage the team's strengths so we can get more output? So what this is actually funny. I just started an engagement and I got the co-founders to do an assessment called the Kolbe A index.
I've done that. Yep.
Oh man, it is so insightful. It is so insightful. When I did it, it was really like reaffirming in a lot of ways.
Is that like Myers-Briggs or DISC or something like that?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yes, similar. What's really cool is it shows your strengths and weaknesses. For example, are you somebody who, like, are you a visionary? Do you like to move quickly, or are you someone who's more of an implementer or somebody who maintains? Like, it shows you all of this about yourself. And essentially, particularly with the Kolbe index, it's like, how would you behave in a situation if you were free to choose, you choose the way to behave that is, I guess, more inherently, how you would like to behave. So it shows a pyramid of what energizes you, what kind of activities energize you, and what kind of activities kind of drain you a little bit faster. So if we have 8 hours in a day, and every single person in the marketing team, is they have the same 8 hours, but some are kind of dragging their feet along. and then others are like really, high performers, really performing and producing a lot. How can we get everybody to produce, as much as possible in those 8 hours by leveraging their strengths? So that's the first thing that I do, so that no one's stepping in anyone's toes. It's actually, how can we make sure you're doing what you really want to be doing, what makes you passionate, what energizes you,
Right.
and then how can we work together? How can we facilitate a conversation where we can put our heads together and do our best possible work together as a team, as a unit, rather than, coming in and kind of saying, okay, here's what's wrong, here's what we got to do, you got to do this, you got to do that.
I bet it helps people understand each other and work together better too.
Yes,
I understand that. That's
yeah. Especially like the co-founders that I'm working with right now, they just did their Colbier, and they've been growing this company, multiple 7-figure e-commerce brand for a couple of years, but they didn't know that they have a lot of similarities in their strengths and weaknesses, and so they've needed like other partners, like either vendors or somebody like myself who has actually like complementary strengths and weaknesses. So it really validated like me coming in, but also it gives them an idea of who else can we work with, either who else can we introduce to the team, or who else can we outsource to, who else can we communicate with, who can like really give us a well-rounded understanding of what needs to be done,
and maybe give some tough love when they need it.
Yes, exactly.
It's great.
So let's invert that for a little bit. And Ellen, let's go to you. Okay, so you're not the fractional CMO in this scenario. You're one of the full-time employees in the marketing team, junior or mid, okay? What changes can you expect to see in your job if your company has decided to hire? Probably you've never even heard the term fractional CMO before. Like, what would I realistically expect if I'm already working there? I've been there for years, right? And now a fractional CMO has been brought in.
I think you can expect to be asked.
Freak out. I should freak out. You think I should freak out?
Maybe,
Yes.
but that's why it's important that the fractional or interim CMO develops relationships early on and doesn't come on like a ton of bricks.
Right.
And, listens to people and secures their ideas, their successes. And, as Baron's saying, do your spreadsheet, understand strengths and gaps each person has. And if they think they're in the right place, but so it's important how you onboard. But I think what a person can expect, they'll be asked a lot of questions,
right?
And they won't know if that person's going to become permanent or not.
Probably
and they'll
not.
probably be wondering if that person will. So what I would advise people is just develop the relationship, just go along with it as if the person is full-time, and don't view that person as a threat. View the person as someone who can help you and help bring you along and get you the resources you need and listen to you and understand what some of the issues are. Because that person, if they onboard right, they should be, to Baron's point, they should be asking insightful questions and understand what the real situation is.
And Baron, if I'm working on a marketing team and I'm junior or mid, I'm in charge of paid ads, or I'm in charge of, email or website or whatever, right? I'm the full-time junior or mid employee, and I hear that a fractional CMO has been hired. Should I assume that like a leader has been hired or a manager has been hired?
That's a very good question in terms of the positioning there, and what is the distinction between a leader and a manager. So let's look at it this way. As a fractional CMO, I would say as a leader, my responsibility, my job is to come in and try to figure out the best way to lift everybody up, to raise the baseline, not just in terms of productivity, but in terms of how everyone feels about their jobs. Is it structured? Am I stressed? Am I running around like a headless chicken because there's a whole lot to do? Or is there a lot of structure and everyone knows what they should be doing? Everyone is communicating, sufficiently, and there's no point in time in which, I'm losing my hair. So I think, and then to that point, as a manager should, come in, maintain, make sure that everyone is on top of their stuff, Everything is up to par in terms of quality. People are communicating for sure. They're also facilitating. I think that as a fractional CMO, people should expect a leader to come into the business, and rather than to push, to raise the bar, right? To push, like, what else can you be doing? We have these
Right.
targets, we have these goals. To facilitate an environment in which these targets can be met, right? How can we support you in your endeavors? Are we not achieving these KPIs? Okay, so what did we do wrong in the last quarter? What can we do better? Having these types of conversations to encourage the team and have, not just structured conversations, but structured understanding of what everyone can do, how everyone can contribute to a company in a way that is inherently aligned with, their skill sets, their talents, and how everyone can do better.
All right, so we're almost at the end. I have like one question I really want to ask you guys. So, as fractional CMOs, do you prefer engagements that are marathons, like, there's some work but it could go on for ages and ages, or sprints where, like, even if you're the only one who knows the date, you've got a date in mind for when this is over and you're going to go on, right? Do you prefer the marathon approach or the sprint approach? We'll start with Baron and then switch over to Alan.
That's a good question. I've heard, as a fractional CMO, you should come in to shortly thereafter or at some point in time to leave, and I've heard that sometimes. But at the same time, for some companies, it doesn't necessarily make sense to come and go. So the question is, is it a marathon or a sprint? My answer to that, a fractional CMO engagement is fantastic in both scenarios. It's not so much about running a marathon or a sprint, because you're going to need marketing leadership over a broader time horizon, like 1 to 2 years. And you're going to need marketing leadership over a 12-week sprint that, makes or breaks your quarter.
Yeah.
So what matters more is, should you be paying a full-time CMO 350K plus? Is there a sufficient amount of work for them to do full-time? If the answer is no, then a fractional engagement is ideal until you can get to that point. At the end of the day, there should also not, be any sort of engagement without clearly defined goals, right? If the goal is to simply hire an in-house marketing team that consists of a vetted director, 1 to 2 managers, 4 to 5 different specialists, and thereafter marketing leadership is not needed on an ongoing basis, then there can be an expiration date for engagement. However, it's still a good idea to have some form of engagement in the form of advisorship, just so that you have that expertise and that oversight. You can leverage the network. Like Alan said, he comes and he has his network as well that he offers for the company. His expertise, his network, that's very, very helpful for a lot of companies. I'll also say this, even with big goals that span over a broader time horizon, it's imperative to have subordinate goals and KPIs that can be achieved through weekly or monthly sprints. So for example, if you want to, generate this much revenue in a quarter, what's it going to take? Well, you're going to have to increase the conversion rate on your website. You're going to have to turn the dial here and increase click-through rates on your ads, generating traffic to your website. There's a bunch of subordinate goals and KPIs that can be achieved in order to raise the bar and reach the ultimate goal. So whether or not it's short-term or long-term, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because you're still going to need marketing leadership to make sure that we're hitting our short-term goals, and that is enabling us to hit all of our long-term goals.
And Alan, how about you? Sprints or marathons?
I'm a relationship guy, so marathons definitely for me. And I set an example before. It was one company, FinThrive. I was interim CMO for 6 months, and they hired the full-time CMO, and I stayed on another 14 months as her advisor, and I also started advising the chief customer officer. And I love that because I helped make her successful and helped her with the team and implementing a lot of the stuff I set in motion with the private equity firm and the ELT I was on. So, when there are those types of engagements, I love that because,
Right.
I mean, the hardest part for me about all of this is once you develop all these relationships, you still have those relationships, but when you break away, it's emotionally tough because you put yourself into it. So
You're a business
I
now.
prefer marathons, but but to Baron's points, you need to have KPIs and you need to look at what
Right.
you achieve on, in certain time periods like quarters, but definitely marathon for me.
Okay. All right. So to wrap up for the audience, Kolbe was mentioned, and that is spelled, in case anyone ever wanted to go look it up. It's Kolbe. It's Kolbe. And then there's a
Not to be
corollary.
confused with a steak.
Hmm?
Not to be confused with a steak.
There's no L in the steak, but yeah, exactly right. Kolbe. And then there's another one that is a really nice companion to Kolbe if you've never done it, called Basadur, and it's Basadur.
Never heard
And
of it.
I find those two like tie in really nicely together. Okay, so guys, thanks so much. Let's wrap it up. Alan, who should contact you, and how should they contact you?
I have two audiences. One is private equity investors to help their portfolio companies. And I also love mentoring CMOs, heads of marketing, as I did at Serious Decisions in Forrester over my 6 years there. So the way to contact me, the simplest email is ag@demandrevenue.com. My website, just how it sounds, demandrevenue.com.
Okay, and
thank you.
Baron,
Great being
who
here.
should contact you, and how should they contact you?
First of all, Alan, I'm going to be reaching out to you because you seem like exactly the kind of mentor I'd love. So who should be contacting me? Companies that are generating, they hit 7 to multiple 7 figures. They're kind of a little bit more startup, growth, scale up. And they are growing quickly. They want marketing leadership. They want an in-house team, or they have some vendors that they need to work with. That kind of like a fast-paced environment, that's where I can really shine. You can find me on my website, baronbelalov.com, BaronBelalov.com. My email's on there. You can find me on Instagram, baronbel, Baronbel, or on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat. However you find me, send me a message. Happy to start a conversation and go from there.
All right, guys. Baron, Alan, thank you guys so much for this. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next video, and thanks.